Previously on Maplestory the novel, Sacred Tears.
It is my understanding that you are one of a band that attacked my clerics.
What are you doing to help us?
Succumbing to the darkness so easily.
He's your friend, not ours.
Where is he?
I almost look like my teenage self again.
And now, the continuation of Chapter 13, Part 2.
Hilda threw her head back with a faked laugh.
What a lark. You tried and failed to stop my murderous quest once already. Yet, after all our little skirmishes, never returned to complete your task. Only when your clerics die by my hand do you decide to stop me?
That's enough!
Dane growled, a pulse of light emanating from him. Hilda held her hand out as her staff raced to it in time to block the wave. The barrier disintegrated before her eyes, throwing her to the back wall.
Even fighting my pet Blackheart, I could tell you were holding back. Why didn't you use your immense power to stop me then?
Hilda coughed, squaring her shoulders.
It was my own ignorance. But I will not let you harm anyone else. Darkness is already draining the world of life. There need not be another.
That's not it, White Mage. There's something else.
Hilda chuckled, bracing for another attack. Dane lowered his head, his shoulders slumping.
You're right. Tossing aside your love for humanity and embracing this wanton slaughter for your own gain sickens me.
Dane replied flatly, pointing his staff forward as another blast of light hummed towards her. Hilda teleported away, summoning her familiar Blackheart, only to be dismissed in a plume of smoke before she could finish. Hilda tried again, but nothing happened.
Well, it seems that you two have learned.
Dane swung again, spears of light howling towards her. She drove her staff down hard on the ground as a blast of power threw the spears into the walls. Dane followed with another burst of light, punching through Hilda's defenses like a knife. Surprised, Hilda threw up her hand as a wall of skeleton soldiers appeared before her, scattering into bones as it plowed through them. Hilda reached to her belt, throwing out 6 small stones, forming a barrier between them. The rocks began to absorb the energy, only for the barrier to shatter and drive her to the railing, overlooking the silent city of Aswan below.
You've grown cold in your years, White Mage. I expected you to try and convince me to abandon my wayward practices.
Hilda wheezed. She tried to move, but something in her chest felt off.
You were the one that decided that life had no meaning. You could have sought out healing for your pain. You could have left Aswan and begun life anew. Yet you held on to that pain, and now you are the only one left in the dead city.
A city that has been rightfully judged! They have paid for the pain they brought in making my life the least worthy in Aswan. I am the only worthy life of Aswan now.
Dane rushed to her in a blur, pointing his staff under her chin as blazing white light hummed at its end. Hilda tried to move away from the uncomfortably warm glow, but felt a hot spear of pain stab her chest with each move.
My mother suffered the same treatment, yet she moved on, found healing, and didn't let the darkness consume her.
Then you know of the pain I suffer from. Your mother was too weak to seek justice for her poor treatment.
Hilda shot back, wincing as the pain shot through her.
You took the lives of those who may have stood by you. You were loved by the people from what I remember, and you threw that love away for what? Fleeting life, youth, and beauty?
Why not? They took their affection from me away, affection that was rightfully mine. Their accusations drove me to the path I walk. And now, they've paid in full, with me as their rightful queen.
Dane's mind froze as her words sank in, bringing back flashes from long ago when he and Minadora found Russell trying to tamper with the Great Circle. That very tampering led to her death. He felt rage boil up his back, the room dimming around him as he dropped his staff away from her face. Hilda took the opportunity to teleport away, reaching for a vibrant potion of purple. She pulled a long glass rod from within it and licked off the contents, instantly healing her broken ribs. Looking back, she could see the darkened air around him as he stood silently.
Oh, come now. This city was at the end of its life. I did them all a kindness, really. If you think about it, they're still alive. They're just helping me stay young and beautiful in the process.
She chuckled. A wave of hatred filled the room as Dane's hair was once again caught in the throes of power surrounding him. His grip tightened on his staff as the light began to hum in an odious hue.
You are just like...
Dane growled.
Why should that make you angry? You may be a lost son of Aswan, but this isn't your home.
Hilda scoffed, healing the last of her wounds when she saw dark-colored chains explode from the ground around him, tipped with large spears. A chain spear hurtled towards her, forcing Hilda to teleport away just as another spear met her where she had gone. The tip sliced through her side, impacting the wall behind her with a hard clang. Another chain was nearing her before she teleported away, again met with more chains. After the fifth teleport, Dane met her, his eyes dark with rage as black mist billowed behind him.
You are the reason she no longer lives.
Dane growled. Hilda tried to cast a barrier spell, but Dane smashed through it, grabbing her by the throat and hoisting her into the air. More chains snaked up from the ground, lowering their tips to her as she struggled to free herself from Dane's grip.
Why are you so furious over people you've never known?
Hilda wheezed. Dane gave no answer as he tightened his grip around her throat, holding her higher in the air until her feet no longer touched the ground.
You took away everything.
Dane hissed, his voice becoming layered. Releasing her, chains drove into her arms and legs, pinning her to the ground. Another chain snaked over her, pointing at her chest, coiling links that were readying to strike. As it howled down, the fear and stunned horror in her eyes caused Dane to shake himself awake, stopping the chain above her heart. In Dane's mind, a chorus of pain-filled wails and hisses of anger demanded that he end her life.
Why not kill her and end it here, Dane?
The voice in Dane's mind returned, this time sounding more disappointed as the chorus died down to background noise.
End it now. She deserves it. She doesn't care about humanity. She only cares about herself.
No! Too many lives have been lost already.
Kill her. You could prevent further atrocities from being committed. If you don't, she will only continue.
I will stop her by another means.
Then you are a fool.
I will not succumb.
But you already have. Look. Can't you hear the swarm of voices crying for her blood? How could the light you claim to channel create these chains?
Dane shook his head, coming to his senses and realizing it was no longer light he channeled, but darkness. With this realization, he backed away from Hilda, the chains vanishing from sight like black sand.
What's the matter? Couldn't go through with—
Dane! We found the old goat!
Orchid called as she and Lotus entered the room with Mars draped over their shoulders. When Orchid caught sight of the room, she paused, wondering why the woman on the floor was bleeding and Dane was stumbling around.
What happened?
Lotus asked flatly. Whatever happened, he and Orchid felt an unsettling presence digging around in their minds. Dane looked up from his hands, casting a horrified glance over to Hilda as she lay bleeding on the ground. He hurriedly walked over to the twins, picking up Mars over his shoulders and carrying him out of the city.
Master, I apologize.
There was nothing to apologize for, Mars. We must simply get away from this city.
Why? What's going on?
Lotus asked as they burst into the fading daylight from the gate.
If we do not leave now, all the power held in the obelisk will be released, and nothing within a 50-mile radius will survive.
As they left the city, Dane could hear the power begin to sound strained as the stone making up the structure began to crumble. Hilda pulled herself to the front gate, her wounds still bleeding, with just enough conscious will to watch the small band disappear in a burst of light.
What has the world come to?
She chuckled, closing her eyes with an almost contented sigh as the power within the obelisk ruptured the stone. Light enveloped everything around it, kicking dust high into the air, shaking the ground, and tossing waves of sand through the desert like an ocean. The group burst into existence within the center of the Aurora Chapel. No sooner had they arrived than Dane could hear the far-off low growl quivering through the ground under his feet. He sighed to himself, quickly taking Mars to the infirmary, laying him on a bed, and beginning to weave a healing spell over him. As Dane empowered it, he could feel a new power weave through his body and arms, further enhancing his magic.
This must be an effect of my contract with Ariel.
He thought for a moment, swearing that he could see the hazy form of the goddess beside him when Mars tried to speak.
Master, you must flee! Hilda, she—
Stay still, Mars. I still must heal your wounds. Your life energy has been dangerously depleted.
Mars struggled to keep his eyes open, feeling the energy slowly return before passing out. Xiriun came in, quickly coming over and holding his hand over Mars to assist. After a short while, Tasia arrived and took over, giving him salves and tonics to help him rest. Almost an hour later, Tasia ushered everyone out of the room and quietly closed the door.
How is he?
Yeah, is he gonna be okay?
Lotus asked, while Orchid absently played with her hair.
He's exhausted, but given rest, he should be back to normal. What happened to him?
Dane sighed hard, hesitant to tell her.
He was maintaining the power of Aswan's obelisk. My mother used to tell stories about how that 4 high-level shamans were needed at all times. I can only imagine that any fewer puts an immense strain on the human body, and by extension, their life force.
Tasia shook her head, hugging the documents she carried closer.
I can't speak to his life force, but physically he will recover. Just try and keep him from doing something like that again.
She smiled, escorting the twins away, leaving Dane and Xiriun to speak alone.
Were you able to determine how Hilda drained the life from our brothers?
Xiriun asked.
Unfortunately, I was not.
Dane replied with an absent tone, his thoughts scanning over actions taken while fighting Hilda. Xiriun nodded, still wanting to ask more questions, but Dane's absent stare told him that it would be pointless, and left to tend to his duties. Once all was silent around him, Dane felt the weight of darkness within him. In his mind's eye, the sight of those dark, snake-like chains gouged into Hilda's arms and legs haunted him. Had he really given into the power of darkness? No, that couldn't have been it. He had used the power of darkness in making the twins. But this was different. It felt like it had left a stain on his soul for all to see. He hadn't thought about it thoroughly at the time, but he had directed all his hate and rage at Hilda. No, it wasn't his rage and hatred. It was from all the people who had perished for her potion. It was they who sought revenge for what had been done to them. But if that were the case, why didn't he notice? Why didn't he see the darkness take over until it was pointed out to him by the darkness after stopping his assault? Why did it even overtake him? Could he use this new discovery to absorb and eliminate the darkness himself?
It could be a viable option,
he thought, returning to the old cottage that had served as the beginnings of the Aurora. Here he found one of his old journals containing thoughts Dane memorized from the ancient Mage's journal. He knew this mage was never from his past, but it was easier to refer to him as such. Near the center, he found an entry referencing someone the ancient mage was rather frustrated with. The mage's words were cutting, describing someone that had attempted to cleanse the darkness before him, but giving no name.
He was a child. Such idiocy is attempted only by fools. A man of science, ignoring testing before full-blown attempts is better off dead.
Dane's brow furrowed. It seemed the person the ancient mage spoke of attempted to purge the darkness by absorbing it outright, thus leading to a catastrophic failure.
If that mage failed, then I will make sure to perform extensive tests before such an act is considered.
Dane entertained the thoughts of experimentation until late at night. Just as his eyes were about to close, he felt a soft touch on his shoulder as a bright but comforting glow surrounded him. He managed to keep his eyes open just long enough to see a hazy projection of Ariel carrying him to his bed in the cottage, laying him down and resting his head on her lap.
Sleep, my love. Sleep. The journey is long. What you seek will be better found in the morning.
Her breathy voice calmed Dane, closing his eyes with his hand firmly clutched in Ariel's. The old man walked the glassy desert sands of Arentia with slow purpose. The light evening breezes sifted through the drifts, grating against his pale skin and metal staff. His giant cobra familiar slithered from place to place, keeping its gaze fixed upon the sands as it moved.
What are you wasting time for? Hurry and find her. I don't want to be here when the sun sets completely. It's already cold enough as it is.
The cobra turned its yellow gaze back to him, spreading its hood and hissing loudly at him. Arcarium clenched his jaw, his eyes widening with anger when the cobra dove below the sands. The cobra burst from under the sand, a woman with blood-red hair resting in its mouth. She coughed and heaved, rolling onto her back and staring at the fire-painted sky, simply breathing.
So, you did survive,
Arcarium said with surprise and disappointment in his voice. Hilda rolled onto her hands and knees, steadying her light head before getting to her feet. The sticky, drying blood on her arms was infested with grains of sand, some of which irritated her wounds.
Are you mocking the Grand Shamaness of Aswan?
She answered, holding her hand out for her staff. But when it didn't come, she became uneasy. Most of her power was useless without the focus of her staff.
Far from it. I am Arcarium of Cretus, master of dark alchemy. I come to offer you a proposal, Hilda. I've heard of your research into eternal youth, and have heard that you seek eternal life.
What is it to you?
Hilda growled, holding a weak healing spell over her arm, pulling the sand from it and closing over the wound.
In exchange for your knowledge of eternal youth, I will help you uncover the secret to eternal life using dark alchemy.
Hilda had studied magic for breaking down the human life force and using it as energy, but this dark alchemy sounded interesting. Magic, and by extension alchemy, always had a root in science. It could even find the root cause for a life force burning out if used correctly. Something that could break down energy and magic entirely was terrifying and intriguing.
Go on, Arcarium. You have my attention.
When your fires all die out, all you know just turns to ash, and your life goes slipping, spinning into doubt. Sunshine trapped inside your heart, cold and lost and in the dark. Looking back on all this, nobody was there. Nothing left to lose. Gotta find the you that's hidden deep, deep down, and light the fire in yourself. Never be afraid to fall, throw yourself into it. Victory's waiting for you. Go fight, show your energy. Don't slow down, no time to waste. Nothing's stopping you now. It's gonna be your day. Hopes and wishes never fade. Fight to make them stronger. Nothing will take them from you. Go fight, show your